Welcome to the Life's Best Medicine podcast, where we are finding hope and healing one episode at a time. No appointment needed, no rubber gloves, and no coping. Just a healthy dose of life lessons to help equip you for this wild journey we call life. Hey everyone, this is a friendly reminder that we are here for entertainment purposes only. We may not even be that entertaining at times, but this is not medical advice. Talk to your doctor, check with your healthcare professionals before making any lifestyle changes or medicine changes. What we're talking about is our clinical experience and what we've seen. And so if you really want our advice, you can consult us. You can actually consult me as a doctor, or you can consult my guest and get all your questions answered. But we can't give free medical advice because we can't pay our bills with that, but we can help to educate you a bit and allow you to think a little bit, and always reach out to your medical professional before making any lifestyle changes. Thank you. Hey everyone, as promised, December crept up on us again this year. I gave you warning all throughout the year that this was coming, so don't act surprised now, but this is a great month. We have some great guests coming on. One of my favorite people, Ben Bikman from Health Code, who happens to be one of the sponsors, is joining us. And I think you'll really enjoy hearing what he has to say. Health Code, great stuff to help you get back on track or to minimize the damage during the holidays. Tons of shakes and recipes. Go to Get Health, GETHLTH.com. And the discount code is METHEALTH, METHEALTH. So go there, stock up for next year when you're trying to get back on the wagon and get back into those pants and shirts that are too tight. We don't want to lose buttons this year, guys. We gotta really do it next year in 2024, big year. Also Keto Mojo, thank you so much. They're doing such great work, and go to their website, keto-mojo.com. They have a ton of information there, old talks, just a lot of information. Also, at the end of the year, they also have health savings account. If you have money in those accounts, you could use that. In most cases, check with your advisor, but you could use that for Keto Mojo to see what your ketones and sugars are looking like at the end of the year. So everyone, thanks for your support. Thanks for listening, and enjoy the podcast. Hello and welcome back to the Life's Best Medicine podcast. Today I'm bringing you the guy who's helping bring this podcast with Health Code. Good stuff. Dr. Ben Bikman, awesome. So great to have you all the way from BYU. I'm neighbors with you now. I'm in Arizona right now, so we're pretty close.
What? When did this happen?
Yeah, I'm kind of going in between, back and forth.
Oh, that's great.
So I'm moving closer and closer to you, man.
Yeah. Well,
we'll see what happens.
Anything to get out of California, brother.
Yeah, my neighbors were just in Moab. They're like, "Oh yeah, we just drive up there and hung out for the weekend." I'm like, "Man, that's so nice from here."
Yeah, Utah used to be one of the best kept secrets in the U.S., but it is growing so much. Yeah, but it's a great place. I love BYU. At the risk of starting this discussion off on a weird topic, higher education, academia is so. I don't want to be dramatic and say broken. That's a bit dramatic, but it's becoming very weird, where I would imagine that a lot of parents get a little anxious about sending their kid to school because they don't know what they're going to learn. We hope they're going to learn an area of a discipline in one particular field, and yet what comes with that? And weirdly enough, it seems to be that private, even religious universities like BYU are some of the last bastions of truly kind of liberal education. But by that, I mean, I don't mean liberal in a political sense, but rather a sense of education being a place of discussion, debate, disagreement, and discovery. And you can't assume you're going to get that at universities these days. And so I'm very, very glad to be at a university that lets me be a scientist, and I don't have to worry about coddling people. That there's a very clear line at this institution of defending academic freedom to teach and research the topics we want to. Now, to my great delight, I get to also do so through the lens of faith as a very religious person. Where I am sort of one part scientist and one part very devoted religious husband, father. And or rather, a man of faith, I should say it that way. So one part science, one part faith, and I think that's a wonderful combination to be able to do. Not only to live life like that, why walk? Why not walk with two legs? After all, we have these two tools, but also to even practice my profession as a professor. And so, like just the other day, just yesterday, a student asked me, Dr. Bikman, why I don't even remember what the specific question is. Why does the system work the way it did? We were talking, this was in pathophysiology. So we were talking about the disrupted endocrine system. It was one part of endocrine disorders. And the student said, why? Why does it happen? And I was able to say, I like to joke that is a divine question. We can't ever really know the why of this world or the body, any phenomenon within the body. We can't know the why. Only God knows why the system was designed or created or evolved, however it happened. But I believe it was designed. Why was the system designed to work that way? I don't know. A scientist can only answer how or what, but never the why. And to me, what I love about this place and even what it allows me to do is look at science as a way of understanding the physical world, that science helps us make sense and understand the world as we experience it. But I happen to believe there's more than just this life. And that's when faith comes in, and I love it. So anyway, it's a long-winded way of saying,
I love you going there.
I love BYU, and I love higher education. I love universities. There's such an energy for an older middle-aged guy being on a campus. There's such an energy with these 20-year-olds who want to come and learn. And I'm just so relieved to be at an institution where learning really is the priority, where we are trying to help these students become experts in a specific discipline rather than trying to have them become activists, because that is, in my mind, so much of what's going wrong with higher education. Students are they're getting into hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt to become activists rather than to become experts in a discipline. And it makes me worried for higher education in general, but again, makes me grateful to be where I'm at. If I were not where I'm at, I would have left academia by now.
Yeah, I would think so. And I think, one thing I noticed when I came to visit you that time, I had a great time visiting your lab and seeing people. When I walked around the campus, I heard positive talk, and I didn't hear other campuses I've been on. I've heard four-letter words, every other word they can't communicate. And you think, wow, these kids are talking about, doing positive stuff. Where are we going to volunteer this week, summer, those kind of things. And I'm sure it's not everyone, but when you see that preponderance of the student body who are positive and uplifting and want to encourage each other, because one thing I know, being on a college campus, one of the big things is depression, suicide, all those things that our young people are dealing with. And if you don't have a good support system where you are, it's going to be like having a professor like you is amazing, where you can sit down and talk and say, hey, I have a question about these things, let's discuss it, rather than what's happened in medicine we've seen is if you question the narrative, you get booted.
Yep. And that used to be something that only happened in the humanities, where you have disciplines that are built more on opinion or subjective qualities, where it really is a matter of debate and your opinion is just as valid as mine, and we can have very differing opinions. You never used to really get that in the realm of science, where we can just say, this is reality. This is real, which is what a scientist is. A scientist is a pursuer of truth. And I love that part of my career. I like that we can look at something and say it's statistically significant or it's not. It is there or it is not. There's no reason to debate it or discuss it and wonder about any gray area. No, it's this. It can be sort of viewed as these two. It's a binary sort of thing. It's there and it's significant, or it's not and it's not significant. I revel in that aspect of my discipline, frankly. But again, even within the hard sciences, that starts to get challenged nowadays at institutions of higher learning.
When I see people like you, Jason Fung, you kind of stay above the fray. You don't get into these battles, and you get attacked. Or what I notice is, and that's why I like doing a podcast, is because in the long form, you can't. It's really harder to take things out of context. So you'll say something, and then someone will say, "Well, he says that this doesn't matter," or whatever. But they misquote what you said. right? Or
Yeah.
not you, but people in general.
Yeah.
But I see that you and Jason kind of stay out of the fray for the most part and try not to get involved and get into wars with people, especially when you're the expert in that field. You're the
Yeah, I
expert
know.
and
I
you're doing
know.
the
Yeah.
research, and they're arguing with you, someone who's never done research or never like looked at it.
Right. It's a delicate balance. There's no doubt. I mean, social media is certainly a double-edged sword. I know that's an overused cliche, but it really applies. Where the way I survive interacting on social media, because I have no team of people, right? It's literally just me. Like when we arranged this time, it's not uncommon for me to get an email from someone's handler or their secretary or their assistant, executive assistant, emailing me, say, Ben, can you put me in touch with your executive assistant? We want to get you scheduled. And I'll just say, yeah, that's just me. So in other words, my point is I don't have time to engage people on social media, where as much as I appreciate the tool, and I massively appreciate the reach that social media can provide people and me, but it also can just suck you in. It can become an absolute black hole that sucks every moment of your time where you're arguing with people. But the thing that frustrates me the most is people who make assumptions that they assume they know what I think about a topic, most especially the never-ending debate between calories and hormones or insulin when it comes to obesity and weight gain and weight loss. In fact, this is the topic of my talk at the Low Carb Boca and the Metabolic Health Summit, both of them in January, where I actually am presenting the confounding variable with this, with research, which is kind of nuanced and a little long, but just to make it clear again, I mean, so the caloric purists will say, even based on studies that are all shorter than 2 weeks, because studies that are longer than 2 weeks do in fact show a statistically significant greater weight loss with low carb than low fat, but they will say, calories don't matter, or rather calories are the only thing that matters. Hormones don't. And the problem with this, I mean, my contention is, of course, that insulin does matter. And in the most obvious example, to quote this scientist who got his PhD out of Dom D'Agostino's lab, Andrew Kutnick, and anyone ought to follow him on social media. He's really wonderful, an incredible thinker.
Yeah, type 1 diabetic and
Yeah,
really
yes,
smart,
it's
really
right.
good guy.
And in fact, the type 1 diabetes is so relevant because in an email exchange, he referred to himself as an insulin knockout model. And I thought that is so clever. Anyone who's listening may know or may not that we use the term knockout to refer to to an animal, to a mouse, usually, where we have eliminated a particular gene. So you could, in fact, create an animal model of type 1 diabetes by knocking out the gene or genes that would be responsible for producing insulin. And so he refers to himself as a insulin knockout human rather than an insulin knockout mouse. And in this instance of a human model of an absence of insulin, if you knock out the insulin, in other words, type 1 diabetes, you could feed this person thousands and thousands and thousands of calories, and they would be getting skinnier and skinnier and skinnier every day. Now, some may say, well, that's just because they're dumping all of those thousands of calories as glucose into their urine, which is not true. They may dump a few hundred calories as glucose, but even that is, in fact, a reflection of what insulin is trying to do. In the absence of insulin, you cannot store energy in the body. It is impossible. That's my problem with the thermodynamic view of obesity, that they want to look at the human body as this overly simplistic system where if I'm just simply pouring in more than I'm letting out in this closed container where there's no other variables going on, then it makes sense. So it's very seductive because it can appeal to that very simplistic part of the brain. But it is not that simple. It is much more complicated. A cell does not inherently know what to do with the energy that it has access to. It needs to be told what to do to some degree, and it's hormones that tell the cells what to do, most especially insulin. So when insulin is low, a cell will simply let the nutrients pass right by. It will not have a net gain. It will not have a net storage of any of that of that energy. Even if it's able to pull some in, it's still going to be letting more out. So catabolic starts to outwin or starts to surpass the anabolic part of this. So my whole contention that I wish people just appreciated the nuance but they just want to pick a fight, or they're ignorant, or both. I'm not saying that calories don't matter. Energy, of course, matters. And in fact, I can state it sort of this way. So we had the type 1 diabetic where energy could be through the roof, but insulin is zero. There is absolutely no potential for fat gain. Oops, I'm animating some things here. There's no potential for fat gain. And that's because not only are they releasing glucose in the urine, they have an increased metabolic rate by about 20%. So their body is simply operating, or the engine is idling at a higher RPM metabolically. And they are making ketones from all the fat they're burning. And then the ketones are being dumped from the body. It's like that little model where we have the energy coming in and the energy coming out, where we're popping holes all over it in the absence of insulin. Now we're leaking all of this energy out, or wasting it, where we're breathing and urinating out ketones. Remember, ketones have caloric value, roughly comparable to glucose. And so we're just eliminating this energy. And then if we flip the whole thing around, if we flip the paradigm where we say, okay, well, let's increase insulin, but then lower energy, you die. That's not something that can work. If you had someone who is fasting or starving and you gave them an insulin injection, they would die, probably within minutes, because what you would do is push all of the available energy out of the blood. You would stop any ketone production. You would force the glucose to go into the muscles and the fat. And so total energy, free fatty acids would drop because you would stop lipolysis. So you would push all of that energy back into the cells, and then the brain would have no energy to pull from, because the brain doesn't have an energy reservoir. It needs to be constantly getting its energy from the blood. So if you have energy down from dietary restriction and you artificially increased insulin, that's death. That doesn't work. And so there are a handful of confounding variables with these studies, and I'll just mention one. So every single study that I'm aware of that has been done that compares low-fat diets to low-carb diets has an enormous confounding variable, because they are all hypocaloric. It always takes at least the low-fat group and always puts them into a calorie restriction. Anytime energy, including eating fewer carbs than they were before. So you take the person who's eating their normal standard American diet and you put them on a low-fat diet, you're always restricting. Total energy comes down, even total carbs comes down. So it's no surprise that insulin comes down too. Every one of these studies has that confounding variable that they reduce insulin as well. And so in my mind, the study that needs to be done, which has never been done, is you need to do an overfeeding study. We need to be a hypercaloric diet where it is a higher calorie. Basically, you're trying to see who gains weight the most easily or who resists the weight gain based on these two diets. So there are two hypercaloric diets. One is low fat, in other words, higher carb, and one is low carb, higher fat, matched for protein ideally, but they're hypercaloric. Let's do that for 2 weeks and see who gains the least amount of fat. That's the experiment that needs to be done. And the closest we have to that was an N of 1 project, a case study that Sam Feltham did in the UK. And he published this paper with Dr. Eric Westman, who's at Duke. And Sam meticulously matched these 3 different diets. I can't remember the middle one. I think it was just sort of one of them was kind of a vegan, plant-based, but one was low fat, one was ketogenic. And on the ketogenic diet, he gained the least amount of weight during these periods, including washouts. It was a very thoroughly done study, N of 1. That's the kind of study that needs to be done. So rather than trying to place the study in the context of weight loss, again, which is going to be lower calorie, even lower carb than when they started, even the low-fat diet is going to have a reduction in insulin, and that's a confounding variable. It doesn't allow us to say it's only a matter of calories. So any claim otherwise is based on false assumptions.
I think throwing another wrinkle that you alluded to or you talked about right at the beginning was faith and stress and all those things. Because I've seen in my practice when people get stressed out, they gain weight. And I always thought it was because you get stressed out and you turn to comfort food, but not necessarily. I have some people on the opposite side of that. I have people who are struggling and then they go on vacation for a week or 2 weeks to Europe and they lose 10 pounds and they're eating pasta and bread. And it might be the food quality there, but it might be a component of the stress, cortisol, insulin, all these other factors. What do you think about that?
Oh, I agree completely. Yeah, there's no question that cortisol, especially, will very much promote fat gain, albeit in a selective kind of altered way, promoting more fat gain centrally. But I think there's absolutely something to that. If someone's living a life where cortisol is chronically elevated, that certainly will counter their efforts to lose weight, no doubt.
And that's how faith and having support and all these things come into this. So people say, why are you talking about this stuff with low carb? Well, it makes a difference, because if you're stressed and tense and hate the world and you're a jerk to everyone and you raise all your stress hormones and insulin all day, like you might as well have cookies at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. Brian, I am one of the reasons I'm such an advocate of religion is because of the community. Now, I don't mean to say you can only get community through organized religion. I'm not saying that, although I deeply believe it myself and am an advocate of it. One of the things that I think is worrying in the world, and certainly within the US, is as people are leaving organized religion, they're leaving a community, and then they don't have one. They don't have people, like if we had a crisis that happened in my home, I, especially because I'm in Utah, I mean, I could make a handful of phone calls and I would have every absolute need taken care of, probably within an hour. It is such a comfort to know we have a family that we go to church with that lives in our neighborhood, and they're just going through a terrible divorce, and it got a little complicated, and she needed some immediate help with her kids. Within hours, this whole problem was resolved. You basically just make some calls and you've mobilized like this almost military-like, with military-like precision, this group of volunteers who are ready to come help. If someone has passed away, the entire church group is ready to go. If there's a baby that's been born, that family has meals for the next 2 weeks or a month for that mom to recover and let the family take some time. Now, that doesn't have to just happen with religion. I know that very much. But it is so important that people feel like they're part of a community. So anyone who is listening to this and is feeling isolated, especially this time of year, find a community, even if it is, in fact, you going to some church. The nice thing about it is you're going to be embraced with open arms. There's nothing a congregation loves more than seeing an unfamiliar face.
Well, it's the same thing as I look at the same way with religion as I do with some, someone walks in who's 350 pounds, who's really struggling. It's like, oh my gosh, this is great, because we can have great success and we could really turn your life around. We could really impact this life, right? If you're eating healthy and everything's good and you're already doing, then you're not going to have as much of a dramatic impact. So I think so many people think like, okay, I'm not going to go to church because I've had such a bad time of it. I've, messed up so much, or I took drugs, or I drank too much. And so that's, people love to really come alongside people and help them out. And, for me, I look at Roseto, Pennsylvania. I don't know if you know that story, but, back in the 50s, they were looking at these guys. They had the lowest incidence of heart disease in the United States. Their seniors over 65 had half the mortality of anywhere else. And so they went and they studied these guys for 7 years. And they go, look, they don't exercise more. They like, really what it came down to is 85% of people were in church, community outreach, doing things. And the seniors, that there was 3 generations in one household. So the seniors were taking care of the grandkids. And so they would tell the parents, you guys go out and have fun and we'll take care of the kids,
Oh, that's my dream. That's
yeah,
my dream.
You have this community. And so people don't realize the importance. And so we see that in the low carb community, or whatever community, carnivore community, whatever community you're in, that you could reach out to people and say, hey, I'm struggling, or I'm having a hard time. And that's one thing that I love about my small groups that I do with my patients, is that, we get together every 2 weeks and just do just a community meeting. And someone goes, I'm having a terrible time, I'm horrible this week, and so someone else can encourage, go, hey, look, you've lost 35 pounds already, you'll get back on track. So sometimes just that encouragement or something someone says really helps lift you out of the mud.
Yeah. In fact, even more, amen to all of this. I completely agree with what you just said. And I would just say this is especially the case for men. I was just, in fact, it's certainly on my mind. I was just having a conversation with a buddy, a colleague who's in the public health department, a field that's kind of getting a little more ideologically driven, unfortunately. But he's absolutely solid. And he was bemoaning the fact that within the public health department, they have a woman's health class, and it's very popular. A lot of ladies take this class, a lot of female students, and that's wonderful. He and I both rejoice in that fact. But then what we bemoaned was the fact that there's nothing called a men's health class. And guess who dies more from everything and kills himself 7 times more than his female counterparts? Well, of course, I've already revealed it, but men. Men, in fact,
More likely to overdose, more likely to go to
yeah,
jail. I mean,
yeah, the
by
gap,
huge
even the
statistics.
gap in mortality is growing, where men are dying younger and younger than women. And so the gap in our life expectancy is getting bigger. If anybody needs to have a health class, I would submit it's probably these poor overlooked fellas who are not even overlooked, even worse, they're vilified actively. I look at these young men here and I'm just so grateful that I was able to get through my collegiate career without having to be told I'm some villain just because I'm a man and because I want to get married and have a wife and provide and protect for my wife and future children at the time, lest I be accused of being some toxic patriarch. But so in fact, we're doing it though, Brian. We're creating next fall, we're going to have a men's health class and we're going to have it focused on spirituality, mental health, and physical health. I, of course, will focus more on the physical health part of it. But all of us are men of faith. We're all 3 of us who are doing this are men of science as well. But we need ways. Men need opportunities to talk with other men. And it doesn't need to be doom and gloom. The problem that men have, where women have the advantage, I heard it stated this way, so I'm quoting someone, where it's stated that women talk face to face. In other words, they can just go to dinner or talk on the phone because they're just having a direct conversation. Men don't do that. Men talk shoulder to shoulder. In other words, we talk when we're doing something. We're fishing or we are hiking, we are mountain biking, we're doing something together. And so it's a very difficult thing for men to get together and bond and to be able to be vulnerable, and yet have that common desire to provide and protect, even if it's not a family, it could be part of a community. That is where men shine. That very part of us that can make us kind of a devil makes us also this great defender. We want cause and purpose, and the world is wanting men to feel bad about that. But anyway, we're going to create a course, men's health. Hopefully it takes the college campuses by storm and other universities start doing it as well.
Yeah, BYU is so blessed to have you, Ben, because this is so critically important. I think the other factor is men, we struggle with pride. We could do it by ourselves. We're not going to look weak if we are, if I've had friends tell me like, man, you're so weak, you need God all the time. I go, yeah, it's true. It's true. I mean, I need it. There's times when everything looks horrible. We've been through some hard times over the last 3 years or so, and you're looking and you go, okay, God, you're in control. I can't fix all this stuff. But being able to have a safe place for guys to go and talk and to say, yeah, I'm struggling with these things, because man, it's the hidden sin. It's the not being able to talk about stuff that separates you from everyone. And once you isolate, we already talked about the importance of community. And once you isolate because you've been blowing it, for instance, in our groups that we have, I know when people aren't there that they're struggling generally. Right. The ones who are there every week are killing it and they're doing great and they're on course because they're like, they want to talk about what they're doing. And other people are like ashamed because they haven't. And so among men, if you look at suicide rate, people who are ashamed or they've done bad stuff that they just can't overcome on their own, and they tried to do it on their own, they can't. And that's where we get into these disaster situations.
Yep. Men need other men to talk with.
And the other thing, the importance of family, you obviously bring that up. I know how dedicated you are to your family, and that, that sends a message to your kids. So many people, I was just watching Sylvester Stallone's story, and he says his biggest regret was that he was out making movies and doing all this fantasy stuff and he neglected his kids. He wasn't there for them, and you can't go back and fix that. So I know you're a guy who says, okay, this is my priority. Everything else comes second, even though you're very, dedicated to your career.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, for sure. But make no doubt about it. My career is a means to an end. As much as I do find personal gratification in discovery and in the opportunity to teach some of those discoveries, it is a means to an end where if it weren't paying the bills to enable me to provide for my family, I would be doing something else.
What would you do, Ben?
That's a great question.
What would your calling be if you weren't doing this?
Yeah, if I hadn't, I've I'll say before, as I start to answer that, when I first got married, no surprise in the LDS faith, we all generally get married pretty young. Cheryl and I married when we were 23. I was in my second year of college. She'd already done a year of college. Now we were a little older in that, I didn't start my university career until I was 21 because I was on a 2-year mission for my church in the middle of nowhere, Russia. It was amazing. Learning fluent Russian and just shivering, all the time, or just being horrifically hot and humid where we were. It was just these massive extremes in the Samara region along the Volga River. So I did that right after high school, and it was amazing. It certainly helps you grow up a little bit. So I started school at 21, met Cheryl, and then she was a missionary as well in that same area in Russia where I had been. And I was very delighted by that. And we became pen pals while she was out. She got home, we got married at 23. So we get married, we're newlyweds, loving being newlyweds, because of course we were both virgins. So it was a delightful time of our lives for all kinds of reasons. But all of a sudden, I had, for lack of a better word, an early life crisis because of my desire to be the provider and our mutual desire, Cheryl's especially. She wanted to be a homemaker. She wanted to have children, not immediately, but then we knew that we'd want to have kids in the next few years. And she wanted to devote her time to being home with the kids, which I loved. I experienced that as a boy, and my mom happened to die when I was fairly young. And I am so grateful. All of my memories of her, which are fewer every year, unfortunately, are because of her being home with us. Me coming home early from school because I was sick, or her coming and picking me up, or walking home from school for lunch and her being there having made a big plate of sandwiches for the kids. I thank God for my mom who was home. And so Cheryl, her desire to want to be home, I really reveled in that. And I took that duty very, very seriously. And yet I didn't know what to do with my life as a career. I was in exercise science at the time, which is one of those undergraduates that sounds really of those degrees that sounds really good, but it's utterly impractical. There is no job, in other words, for that. You don't graduate that and have a job that's sort of built in like you do if you go into engineering or nursing or accounting. There are those fields where there is an explicit job waiting for you, construction management, whatever it may be. I happened to choose a career that an academic field that did not have that, but it was a topic I was very interested in. And at the time I thought that was enough. However, I was beginning to increasingly see the flaw with that line of thinking, which is, what am I going to do when I graduate? It became a matter of more fasting. In my religion, we have very much a culture of fasting for religious reasons, to kind of have the spirit sort of control the body, and in so doing come closer to God, if you will, or to just make yourself more open to inspiration. So I was fasting, I was praying, I was attending the temple, everything I could to try to open up this conduit to any kind of revelation, just a personal impression of what I should do. And one day I was sitting in our dumpy little basement apartment working. I was actually sitting on our bed working on a lesson for Sunday school. The next day, it was a Saturday, if I recall correctly. And working on this church lesson for this young men's group, these 16 and 17-year-old boys that I was asked to teach that week. And I just had this incredibly clear impression to go talk to one particular professor and ask about what it's like to get a Ph.D. and become a professor. And that was a field I had not been considering. That was not a career option that had been in my mind. It was one of the clearest impressions I've ever had. And I've never forgotten it. And as there have been trials or struggles or inclinations or opportunities to leave this path as I was on it, I would remember that moment and decide to stay on the path. And so let me just say, I am profoundly grateful for the career path I chose. I'm so grateful for the opportunities that have come to me inside the university and even out to help, supplement my income from time to time with opportunities. It has been a profound blessing to have a lot of freedom and an opportunity to provide. Now, if I had not done this career, I will say I've always been fascinated in economics. Economics is a field that I really am interested in. Now that might have still taken me into academia, but if you'll allow me to say, if I hadn't done this as a career, what else might I've been done? What I've done, I would have liked to be a professor of economics. And if it's not academia at all, I don't know. I don't know what I would have done.
You were just bred for this, man. It's in
Yeah,
your
well,
blood, right?
I do. I really do revel in being a teacher, which is something I never would have imagined. I'd never anticipated that. I've always known my whole family, we're pretty comfortable in front of a crowd. All of us are pretty competent public speakers, and generally quick thinking and eloquent, which works well if you're in public, if you're speaking in front of a group. So I've always enjoyed that, and to couple that with an opportunity to take valuable ideas and to share them, that I really do love that. But with economics, I think economics is one of the most unappreciated disciplines. Like, for example, the whole COVID response. I think it's insane that we didn't have economists a part of those conversations at the highest levels who could cite and anticipate, in some instances on social media quite accurately, just the catastrophic results of these lockdowns, for example. I think, economics is a field that fascinates me, but it's also a very, very frustrating one when you see what we're doing economically.
Yeah, sometimes you're better off not knowing,
I
that
know.
makes it such a
I
challenge. And
know.
I'm so thankful because I was thinking about it when I talked to Jason Fung. He said, yeah, I would have been at like a jet. He would have made jets, like a jet engineer. I
Oh,
was like,
that's
man, just think he
amazing.
goes into jet engineering and you go into economics, like, where are we at, right? Because
Yeah,
look,
yeah.
I'm telling you, Ben, like so much of the stuff you've come up with, I share with patients. I share your graphs every day, and about the insulin resistance and how it happens over years. And it's so amazing what you do in the lab translates over to us helping patients directly, and so us working together. It's just such an amazing thing because if you don't do that, I don't have that tool.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, it means a lot to me. One of the pivotal moments in my career was right after I'd gotten tenure, or BYU's version of it. BYU is one of those institutions that's smart enough to not actually grant real tenure, which is having a job that you don't deserve. But BYU has its own version of it. Right after I got that, I realized that I had achieved the kind of last great milestone in this very long career. In every physician, you know what I'm talking about. It is a very long career. But even once you get hired as a professor, it's not like you're done. You have this looming, potentially career-ending evaluation about 6 years later, which is the tenure review process, and the advancement from assistant professor to associate professor. And then later you can choose to advance to the rank of full professor if you'd like, which I did a couple years ago, and I'm very glad that I never have to advance or get evaluated again. I have arrived. But tenure is what you have to do. You have to go through that process, and if you don't get it, you have 1 year to find a new job. And so once I got that out of the way, I asked myself a series of questions, and it was an explicit, actual kind of conversation with myself, where I asked myself, do you have valuable knowledge in your head? Do you have a knowledgeable or a valuable knowledge set? And I thought, yes, what I know about metabolism and obesity and diabetes is helpful, and it would benefit people. Second question then, after that one, what's the best way to share it? What's the best way to share that knowledge? Is the best way to share that knowledge through peer-reviewed manuscripts in science journals? And that was a resounding no, a laughable no. That is not the best way to share knowledge. Now, I have to do that. That is the currency of academia. That's a currency that will buy things for you, if you will, within the ivory tower. It buys promotion, it buys merit advances, raises, or whatever. And also gives me an opportunity to mentor students and get them published and help them get into medical school, which almost all of my undergraduates are trying to do. But that still didn't change the fact that that was not the best way to share my knowledge with the average person. And so then I said, well, what is the best way? And that was the beginning of me writing my book. And I thought, I want to write a lay audience book, which became Why We Get Sick, all about insulin resistance, metabolic health. And then I thought, well, what's the best way to market that book? I want to be able to sell it. Yeah, boom. Yeah, I want to be
I
able
was
to
sitting right here,
sell.
right next to my desk. Yeah, that's how important it is.
So my desire to want to be able to market it myself and help people be aware of it then led me to social media, where I created, Twitter and then later Instagram handles really intended to be very professional. I never intended for these to be personal. It was never going to be me doing things with my family, never me at home. Indeed, I don't want anyone to really know anything about that kind of thing. It was just going to be me teaching simple ideas that I thought people would find valuable and thus interesting. And that was the beginning of it. And then it was these opportunities to get on podcasts like this, or to be invited to a kind of lay audience event like the ones in Florida in January, which I have really, really enjoyed. It has helped me enjoy my job as a professor more, because as much as I love my students, and I do, sometimes it's tiring when their primary motivation is just, is this going to be on the test? That's the sort of question. And maybe they're taking the class very reluctantly. They need to for their major, and they don't actually want to be there. They just want to know the minimum. and that is not every student, of course. But when I compare that with the students, if you will, when I go to these public meetings, oh my gosh, it is so gratifying to be in a room of a handful of hundreds of people who are eager to learn everything they can. They are paying their own money to be there. They want to hear and understand every principle. They are just the most devoted students. And I find it's just, like I said, it's very gratifying and fun. It's fun to not only have a different crop of students than I'm used to at my university, but also in age and means, but also just their overall eagerness to learn. Again, while I have many that fit that bill, even here as a professor at my university, there at other events, it's literally every single person in the audience, and that is a lot of fun. It makes me really enjoy my job more.
Yeah, and to be questioned. I mean, that's the thing in medicine I've seen. You can't question things. You get like that's natural. That's science, is to question and say, why do you believe this? Why do you see this? Why do you see it this way? And have this respectful discussion rather than
Yeah.
attacking you personally because you have a different view on fat metabolism than someone
Yeah.
else does.
Yeah.
It's amazing because sometimes you can take little nuggets from each other. I've seen that people I may not agree with a lot, but there's certain things I could say, oh, I like this aspect of what they're doing, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's so important that there's open discussion part of
Oh
it.
yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. We for sure need dialogue. I mean, there's no doubt we're losing the ability to just disagree politely in society. That's something that if you disagree with them, not only are you wrong, but you're even possibly evil in their mind. And that's one of the biggest differences. You compare the kind of societal contention now versus, say, the 60s, which preceded me, but I've become familiar enough with it. That was a very polarizing time, but people it didn't seem from what I've understood, there wasn't this demonization where the other side is evil. And this can certainly apply to just scientific debates that we have, where people they will claim you're absolutely wrong. To hell with the data that you're citing. Their data is better than your data. Even if your data happens to be clinical trials and they're purely relying on correlational population level studies, which of course is garbage. But yeah, I mean, we need to remember how to disagree diplomatically.
So what are the new things, Ben, that you've come up with? Or I've seen you talk about creatine, these kind of things. What are the newer things like supplements, things that you're seeing that you go, these are actually legit, valid?
Yeah. Yeah, there are a handful. So I am certainly an advocate of creatine, more so for brain health than muscle health, actually, where there is a robust body of evidence showing that creatine use is beneficial for cognitive function. And that makes sense. Creatine will go into cells and help the cells reproduce ATP more quickly. And ATP is the way the cell buys work or some sort of accomplishment or whatever the cell needs to get done. ATP is going to help it do it. Other ones are berberine. I've really become an advocate of berberine, having tested it more and more on myself. And I'll give a shout out to a company called Blokes. This is a company that did a really deep dive blood test for me, and it was incredibly insightful. And then one of the things they had said in this sort of recommendations for some supplements, it was berberine. And having a guy I wear a CGM very often, and I would test some berberine. People may know my general diet as a dad is I'm incredibly strict with my breakfast. I'm incredibly strict with my lunch. It's low to zero carb, but then I eat dinner with the family. Whatever the family's eating, I'm eating dinner with my family. And so that gives me an opportunity to test the effects of berberine, and berberine will absolutely help control blood glucose. So that's one that I'm an advocate of. And then even now, right now, maybe a final one, I'm drinking a little bit of yerba mate. We actually just published a paper on yerba mate about a month ago, and we found that it increased metabolic rate in the fat tissue. This was an animal study, because sometimes animals just are easier to deal with because you can get more tissue. We can look at the brain, we can look at the fat, we can look at the muscle, and it's just really difficult. You can't get brain samples from a human. Even if it seems many undergraduates aren't using theirs, they're not going to volunteer for a brain sample donation or biopsy. So we found that there was some pretty beneficial and selective mitochondrial benefits. But let me just mention one last other science bit. Just last week, we published a paper, another animal model. This is an animal model of Alzheimer's disease. And we increased their insulin in the animal and then found a handful of interesting consequences because of this. One, the hyperinsulinemic animals, the elevated insulin animals, gained weight more, they ate more, so they were fatter. They became more insulin resistant as well, just by increasing their insulin. And then we found specifically in the brain that the hyperinsulinemia increased this type of fat called ceramides. And people have heard of ceramides because they've heard about it in commercials for lotions or shampoos or something. And that is the same molecule. There are a lot of different types of ceramides, but that's not the same. So people would say, oh, I'm going to stop using my ceramide skin lotion. No, there's no evidence that that has any effect in this regard. But rather, insulin was promoting the accumulation of ceramides within brain cells. And that as ceramides accumulated, it disrupted the mitochondria. And then the mitochondria weren't functioning as well. So high insulin led to high ceramides, which led to mitochondrial dysfunction. In the midst of the high insulin, if we blocked the ceramide production with actually a compound that comes from fungus called myriocin, then the high insulin had no effect and the mitochondria were perfectly fine. So this suggested the sequence of events that I just outlined, which is that ceramides are this critical mediator of some of the mitochondrial damage that happens in the midst of insulin resistance or hyperinsulinemia. But regardless, the takeaway being, once again, control your insulin. That is the easiest, not easy, that is the simplest, most direct intervention to try to offset any of those negative things I just talked about. Control the insulin.
And that's such a huge deal. And that's one thing, your brother and I had talked about it. He sent some samples over to a Paradise for Parents, someone I interviewed here, Hal. And so they're doing ketogenic diet with these seniors with dementia, and they're seeing benefits, and they're documenting it with videos and stuff. So we sent them some health code over. And so that's the thing. I just want to touch on that topic, is that with our seniors, they're getting these horrific nutritional plans, and it's unbelievable. They go into skilled nursing facilities and you see what they're eating, and they're eating Fruit Loops and all these things that lead to this worsening of insulin resistance in the brain. I'd love to hear your take on that.
Yeah. Oh, it's tragic. In fact, a paper was just published today, a review paper that is summarizing all of the available evidence looking at the benefits of ketones in Alzheimer's disease. And one of the most compelling quotes from that is the statement that you can detect reductions in brain glucose use up to 15 years before there's any evidence of cognitive decline. So the insulin resistance or the reduced brain glucose use is the canary in the coal mine. It is the early indicator of future cognitive decline. But the tragedy is really twofold, because at the same time the brain is becoming insulin resistant and less capable of using glucose for fuel, the more it needs ketones to fill that energetic gap. There's that gap that must be met, and ketones are the only thing that can fill it. But the same body that has insulin resistance, that's depriving the brain of the glucose in the first place, is the same body that in the midst of all of its high insulin is incapable of making ketones. And so the one fuel the brain is crying out for, the body is depriving it. And so the brain is saying, there's lots of glucose, but I can't get it because I'm insulin resistant, because part of certain brain sections, like the hypothalamus, require some degree of insulin signaling for glucose uptake and other brain sections as well. So in the midst of the insulin resistance, despite drowning in an ocean of glucose, the brain can't use it. And then it's crying out for the only other fuel, the life raft, in the form of ketones, but the high insulin won't let the life raft come to save. There's no ketones being made. And so the brain is starving in the midst of plenty. Specifically, it's drowning in a sea of glucose and it can't use any of it for energy.
Yeah, it's an amazing thing. Those in hospice or those of us docs who've taken care of people for a long time, we've all seen this phenomenon where someone is, they have advanced dementia, can't carry on a conversation, don't know anyone's name. And then all of a sudden, when they're dying and they're not eating anymore, they stop eating. And all of a sudden, they'll say, hey, here's where I hit all the money and here's where this is. And they have this moment of clarity. And I'll bet they're going into ketosis, major ketosis, and their brain fires off that one last stoke of energy. And then boom, they're done.
Yeah, how remarkable. Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, for me personally, one of the reasons I adhere to a generally ketogenic diet, or keto light, if you will, knowing what I just disclosed earlier about dinner with the family, is because of my desire to keep my brain healthy. Alzheimer's disease worries me or scares me more than any other disorder. As much as I am worried about cancer, having seen my mom suffer through that, I would prefer to get cancer than Alzheimer's disease.
Yeah. There's certain things like that. So, certain things scare you, if you just drop dead, that's one thing, but getting something like ALS and all these neurodegenerative Parkinson's is such a horrific thing because none of us wants to be a burden. And you think about it, the mental health part of Alzheimer's is so brutal. I mean, it's just so devastating to the family. So, it's so, because you remember dad the way he was, and now all of a sudden you can't remember how to tie his shoes, it's so demoralizing and it's such a hard thing. So that's why I'm excited about your research and looking at this. And I know you were talking about looking at brains post-mortem, maybe, that they were doing some studies on that with Parkinson's and, how do we really help people?
Yeah. So we didn't do any Parkinson's work, but we published a paper looking at humans, brain samples post-mortem, and we did a gene analysis of just to look at the expression of these genes that were involved in metabolism, specifically genes involved in telling the brain to burn glucose, or genes involved in telling the brain to burn ketones. And there are a handful of different cell types we looked at that are relevant in the realm of cognition and Alzheimer's disease. But within the brain samples we had, they were split into two populations: people who died with confirmed Alzheimer's disease and people who died with no sign of Alzheimer's disease. First of all, another group had already found that plaques were distributed equally among all of the groups, that these beta amyloid plaques that we've been told are the root of all Alzheimer's disease evil had no predictive power. It was just as likely that someone with Alzheimer's disease would have no plaques as it is that they would have it. And the same with the people who had no evidence of Alzheimer's disease. They may have had plaques or not. However, what we found was that every single gene involved in glycolysis was significantly reduced, and every gene involved in ketolysis, or the burning of ketones, all of them but one was normal, and even that one was only modestly down. So to say that in a bit more general terms, the ketone pathway was uncompromised, unaffected, there, present, ready to work. The glucose pathway was utterly compromised, broken, not ready for work.
Wow. I mean, there's so much. What do you see coming down the road? Like anything else you're looking at, this is all amazing stuff because it all leads back to this metabolic health. And this is why I'm so excited, because so many of us are hearing from psychiatrists, Chris Palmer, Georgia Eid, all these people that are seeing like, hey, metabolic health is mitochondria is really, really important.
Yeah. Oh, they're both wonderful. I've not met Chris personally, but I've met Georgia multiple times and just adore her. But they both strike me as really solid, smart people. I'll just mention one last project that we're involved with, and this is working with my very good friend and collaborator, Paul Reynolds. Anyone who hasn't yet, go follow him on Instagram, especially. He's an inflammation metabolism guy. People can find him at Paul Reynolds, Ph.D. So he's more of an inflammation guy, but we're working on a paper right now looking at these animals that have a reduced expression of, it's a long word. The acronym is RAGE. It's a clever acronym. It's the receptor for advanced glycation end products. So advanced glycation end products, actually hemoglobin A1C fits that bill too. But this is when you've taken a molecule in the blood, like an amino acid, even on a protein, and you bind it to a glucose. So the glucose is bound onto this, creating what's called an advanced glycation end product. People have probably heard of glycation to some degree. So these AGEs, advanced glycation end products, will bind this receptor, RAGE, and activate an inflammatory, an immune type response within a cell. And this happens on every type of cell, not just immune cells. But what we're finding in general is that these RAGE knockout animals are protected to a degree against diet-induced obesity. We have them on a Western diet, high fat, high sugar, and we're looking at the degree of weight gain and the degree of inflammation and the degree of changes in the mitochondria of the fat and the muscle. And it appears to be that this pathway is to some degree playing a part in the harmful metabolic consequences of diet-induced obesity. Now, the relevance of that remains to be seen. You know, this is a very, very basic study, but it does open the door potentially for future therapeutics, as much as me and you and everyone listening is not an advocate of drugs. Drugs cannot solve the metabolic problems. They can only treat symptoms. Nevertheless, there's always something beneficial to knowledge for the sake of knowledge. But that's Paul's expertise, looking at that inflammatory pathway in particular. And the more we're collaborating, the more we're trying to look at the convergence of these ideas, the metabolic and the immune.
Yeah, it's amazing. Amazing. Hey, thanks for all your work and what you're doing for humanity. It's just amazing. And people, if you're listening, that when I talked to Ben one time, we were at the gym at a conference, like, hey man, if I want to live a long life, what do I got to do? And it's so dang simple. You want to tell people the 5 things?
What did I say? I don't know. I hope it was brilliant.
Well, it's brilliant, man. You go, okay, number 1. Well, it wasn't brilliant at the moment because it was like, okay, don't work yourself to death and be stressed out all day. Number 2, get enough sleep. I was like, at that time, I was working 18-hour days and stressed out all the time. I'm like, I don't think I like your rules, doc.
Yeah,
and then number 3 was exercise regularly, like what we were doing. Next, eat real food, cut out the processed food. Next, don't smoke or drink to excess. Right. And you go, how many of the things we're treating are from that?
Oh, yeah.
It's just incredible. So,
well, Brian, I was just asked the other day in the hallway by an old retired professor who stopped by my office, and he's lost 60 pounds. He's feeling amazing. And he said, Ben, what do I need to do to live really long? And I said, first thing you need to do is choose your parents wisely.
Yeah.
And then I said, the second thing you need to do is live a life where you are primarily keeping insulin low. Some of the most consistent themes of longevity in humans, which is all deeply flawed research. The problem with all of these longevity gurus, Brian, is that everything they say is based on speculation or extrapolation. There are simply no well-controlled human studies that can make any firm conclusions on longevity. However, there are many studies that find that insulin sensitivity is a common trait within familial longevity across these generations. And that fits with the basic or mechanistic research very well. Everyone who is exclaiming the evils of mTOR and the need to keep mTOR in control, if they're not then saying, thus we should control insulin, then you stop listening to them. If the next thing they say is, thus we should control protein, you should laugh in their face. Because protein, yes, depending on the amino acids, may have an acute spike activation of mTOR. That's good. It helps the body know what to do with those amino acids. In other words, grow protein. But when you spike insulin, you are now activating mTOR and keeping it turned on for potentially hours, unlike any type of protein bolus. And then, unfortunately, the person spikes their insulin again. And so the people are spending every waking moment not only in a state of elevated insulin, which is driving insulin resistance, which, as the evidence would suggest in the correlational studies, is going to be problematic for longevity, but it's also keeping mTOR activated, thereby explaining a mechanism whereby high insulin could promote aging, premature aging, and reducing longevity. So the key to live long, again, choose your parents wisely, but if you can't do that, keep your insulin under control. And then I would just add, finally, be part of a community, in my mind, preferably one built on faith, but if not that, one built on common moral and ethical values.
Awesome, man. Like always, it's such a blessing to have you. And I have to ask you again, since this is life's best medicine, what's life's best medicine for you? Has it changed since last time?
I don't remember what I said last
no one
time,
remembers what they said last time, right? But it's good
what
because
I'd
then we
say,
could reassess that.
yeah. Well, what I always think of, the way I want to get through life and live life, is take my duties seriously, but not myself. That's my advice to everyone listening. Take your duties seriously, your job, your responsibilities, your tasks, your burdens. Take it seriously, but don't take yourself seriously. Know that it's okay to laugh at your mistakes. And in fact, pray and hope and try to find humor in the flaws, your flaws and the flaws of others, and invite other people into that laughter with you, so that you're creating a culture where you can put your arm around someone. And if they make a mistake, rather than berating them and belittling them and mocking them, you can laugh with them. That's just something I try to do as a parent. If within the home, things are just getting tense, everyone's snapping at each other and people are starting to scream at each other, I will start laughing maniacally, just at the top of my lung, like a barbarian who's just broken through the gates and is in like some sort of rage. I'm laughing maniacally, and it just diffuses the situation. As much as, my 13-year-old daughter, who's very volatile, she'll get angry that dad is laughing and she's worried and she's screaming about something, but you just can't stay angry. And I'm not doing it to mock her, but then she smiles and she gets angry that she's smiling. And before you know it, things have just settled down and now we can actually talk. And so just don't overlook the value of laughter, even if it is temporarily forced. Fake it till you make it.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Bringing peace. That's what you do. And that's what I love about you. So everyone listening, this is one of the great ones. This is having Dr. Bikman on. It's such an honor to know you and to see your character, not just your research, which is outstanding. And it's your word, and that's why, it's just such an honor to be part of your team. And and I really appreciated when I asked you guys to sponsor me, you're like, hey, and I said, hey, look, there may be some controversy. He goes like, we trust you, right? Well, we trust your judgment, what you're doing. Maybe it was a bad move on your part,
no, come on.
But I think it's just such a great thing that you bring these stories out, that you're a part of it. And I know before this, when I reached out to you guys for help, say, hey, I have some people up in Vacaville. I'm trying to get them off diabetes meds and all that. You guys were the first one to respond, say, hey, let us send them some stuff. We knew that wasn't going to be a market for you. That was just out of being a decent human being. And I think that's, such a blessing to be around. I think so many people have checked in their humanity for success and for notoriety or whatever they want. So I appreciate you and always standing strong and not being afraid to talk about the moral issues too, because that's a huge part of it.
It is. Yeah, we're on the same team, man. I'm glad to be in the trenches with you. Hey, are you going to be at Florida at any of the meetings coming up?
No, I got to work, man. I got to pay for this Arizona place, No,
I get it. I get it. Later.
But we're going on the cruise. We're going on the cruise next year, so we'll catch up then for sure.
Yeah, we'll post some Speedo pictures for everybody.
Yeah. Hey, and everyone, be kind to yourself, be kind to others, and take note of what Dr. Bikman's talking about: community. Not being a jerk to everyone, giving someone a hug when they mess up. We all mess up, and we want to have that grace. So extend that to others, and it will be extended back to you. So, thank you again for listening. Thanks for your support. Thanks for supporting Health Code and all that they're doing. Gethealth.com, GETHLTH. And also the great thing is Dr. Bikman's blog is on there. He has so much that he's releasing, so much great information.
In fact, Brian, also let me mention, people might have known years ago I was involved with Insulin IQ. Well, now I'm taking it over. So you can find everything I'm doing at insuliniq.com. So please go there.
All right, insuliniq.com. Doc, thanks for joining me. I know you're a busy guy. Greatly appreciate it.
My pleasure. My pleasure. This was great. Thanks, Brian. See you, buddy.
Bye. Thank you for listening to this episode. We greatly appreciate your support. We would greatly appreciate a positive thumbs up on all of the platforms like iTunes and Spotify or wherever you're listening. And we just thank you for our Patreon supporters. We greatly appreciate your help in getting this message out. We think there's a lot of important information. And hopefully this helps you. Have a great day, and thank you for listening, and thank you for your support.